before we get started, I'm not going to list all the different people to thank, but I really want to thank Shane. And where is Tom Harkin? Is he here? So he's going to get up and give you words at the end. But I think it's very fair to say that none of this would happen without his vision. Anybody who knows me, I always get emotional. So I think Tom, as a leader in the US Senate and as a leader in the United States, has taken his vision and his belief that change can happen and been bringing it across the United States and around the world. So he deserves credit, applause, yes. But I think what we're going to get into discussing is what we hope you're going to take away from this event. Because nothing will come out of this event, and Tom will not be happy unless he's going to know and be able to see over the coming year the real outcome of this convening. So we're going to transfer this from us to you, and you need to leave here today with a list of what you are going to commit to doing, and then sharing that and keeping the momentum going. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Judy. As a fellow disability rights activist, it's a huge honour to not only meet you for the very first time here at Harkin Summit, my first Harkin Summit, but to be hosting this conversation with you. But before we get into it, how are you feeling? Because I am all sorts of emotions right now, especially after that poem. How has Conference and Summit been for you?
I think, we've been asking people as we were preparing for this closing, or we shouldn't call it a closing, but rather an opening. And I think there's a great deal of energy. There are a lot of new people who have been here. And I think it's fair to say that many of you have described this as an experience which has opened up your mind and your ability to see both what others are doing as well as what you need to be doing when you leave. So for me, I am cautiously optimistic. And I say cautiously optimistic because on some level, any of those of us in the room who've been involved in advancing, today we're discussing employment, really do privately say, why is it taking so long for us to get where we are when we have so much further to go? But I think I'm feeling, if the motivation that people seem to be expressing and the learning that's been going on over the last 2 days is authentic, then we will be able to measure improvements that the government here has made, but that other businesses have come to share about what they're doing. But the businesses, even doing the best, know, as they've said, that there's much more to be done. So I think it's all about accountability.
Absolutely, and keeping this a priority across every business level, and for those that are going to commit to action, to keep fighting the good fight, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really being able to demonstrate that the leadership of the organizations that you belong to are really looking at disability, when we discuss diversity, as being truly a part of the diversity agenda of universities, government, private sector, nonprofit sector. And not just within the disability groups who are already committed to this, but really to a much larger group. And we've been discussing in preparing for today that one of the continual issues that needs to be addressed is how do we help ensure that when we look at diversity, that disability is not a stovepipe unto itself. But when we talk about the intersectionality of all people with disabilities and others, we need to be seeing disability cutting across all the other groups. So the Asian groups, the Black groups, the Latino groups, the gay groups, on and on. And we're not there yet, but that's really a part of this agenda, that we can't really look at diversity as only something in the disability stovepipe, but it has to be across all of the work that's going on. And the leadership of the organization from top to bottom needs to make it clear that this is what their objectives are and people have to be held accountable.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that diversity is simply a measurement, it's a count. Inclusion is actually a choice. It's choosing to include and respect all the diverse characteristics that make people what they are and who they are. So by not being inclusive, we're choosing exclusion. So that's why this is so important.
I think one of the values of what's happened here over the last couple of days, which all the Harkin team and Steve and everyone else has been discussing, is how accessibility has been demonstrated here. And, I think when we talk about inclusion, the fact that disabled people have been excluded from so many venues for so long means that people really are learning. And the question is, as you're learning, how are you, for example, in your budgeting, accounting for a conference, accounting for an accessible venue, accounting for sign language interpreting, accounting for captioning, accounting for services for people who are blind, on and on, accessible bathrooms, whatever it may be. So there is a lot of learning, and I think that's really what's very important here is some of you know more than others. And I think partly for me, what the Harkin Summits over the years have been encouraging is open the door, look at what you know, what you don't know, and be willing to acknowledge what you don't know. Don't hide behind it as an excuse, but rather take it on as a clear agenda. And obviously, one of the most important things is really talking to disabled individuals in wherever it is you're engaging and try to set up an opportunity in appropriate settings for people to feel that they can honestly give feedback on what is going on, whether it's in hiring, whether it's in customer service, services being delivered, media representation, on and on. But come to the people who are most affected. And I know you and I have spent a decent amount of time in the last 2 days talking about the fact that both of us had our disabilities when we were young and how we have not seen ourselves then, and a little better now, but still not, represented in the media. And how that really has an impact not just on young people, but I think one issue that we haven't really discussed, but one that I think you should leave with, is when we're talking about disabled people, we're talking, I think Tom and others have mentioned, that we're a community that anyone can join at any time. And that's very true. When looking at it, though, from an employment perspective, I think there are different chunks of how we have to look at it. So for me, I look at people who are like under the age of 18 or 21. I look at when did they acquire their disability? Were they in regular schools getting good educations? Were they in segregated schools getting poor education? Were they encouraged that work was something that people do in our societies? Or were they being told that you really can't work? Don't have high expectations. There are all these problems. What are you doing as a university, as a business, as a whatever you are? Are you mentoring? Are you doing internships? Are you bringing younger people into your entities? Are you showing them what the future can look like, how you want them to be involved? If you're not, if you are and you're not including disabled people, that's a big issue. But I also really want to talk about people of working age, because one of the biggest groups that we don't spend enough time talking about are non-disabled people who are working, who become injured. That is a very big issue, because many companies are not doing what they need to do to ensure that those individuals are not cast out from the companies, but that they are maintained in the company, if at all possible. Changing jobs, changing portions of jobs that people may need to do. It's an important issue because, again, it's the myth of disability that younger people and their families frequently are talking about what you can't do as opposed to what you can do. And people in the 20 to 50-year-old group, they're getting the same messages, but they've really, been drinking from the water hose. And they really believe that they maybe can't work. And countries around the world, in order to get benefits, you have to prove what you cannot do as opposed to what you can do.
Yeah.
So in addition to the employment and economic issue, I also feel that one of the goals of the conference is to allow people to see that disabled people are like everybody else. We may do things differently, some of us. We may need things, around us somewhat different. But if you don't see yourself as a meaningful part of the community, if you see yourself as now being cast out, it is really difficult to tell someone, okay, you're not going to get benefits unless you talk about how you are unable to work and what that does for you.
Yeah.
But I want to just raise one other little point, which is people are getting older in countries around the world. And what we have seen is a failure of our city and rural planners to really be designing our communities in a way that those of us with certain types of disabilities can live in the community and get the supports we want. If we can get the issue of disability seen as a normal part of life, where work is an integral part of that, then we can stop having these ridiculous fights about whether or not transportation should be accessible, whether or not housing should be accessible, whether people should be living in nursing homes, which we would say no, what kind of community services do we need, and that really our society overall should not be waiting till they're 50, 60, 70 years old to find out that the communities they live in are failing them.
Yeah.
And they're failing them because we haven't demanded something higher. And employment is an integral part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a complex relationship between skills, employment, and disability, because currently these three things aren't really being considered together. They're all approached in isolation. And non-disabled people often forget that we as disabled people also have preferences as well as needs to be met. So what advice do you have on how businesses can help to close this skills gap?
Well, the skills gap, I think, it's not just in the disability community. So I think there's a theme throughout what we've been saying and the conference has been discussing. Whatever the entity may be, and what's great about here today is there are so many different kinds of entities. But you need to look at, for example, in the skills gap area, what are you doing to work with the younger population of people to allow them to understand what are the skill sets of tomorrow? How are you retraining people as jobs are maybe leaving and going to other countries, and we need to be recreating our communities, our job market, and are disabled people being included in that? And I can say, one of the things that Tom did when he was working in the Senate was really not only looking at what legislation would say, so very frequently in the United States, it would say, like from early childhood for a program that we have called Head Start, that at least 10% of the kids had to have disabilities. But in reality, that wasn't happening. And in vocational education, there also were percentages put in, but frequently that wasn't happening. So people leaving from here really need to look at what is the entity that we're working with. How is it addressing skill sets? And is it addressing skill sets for disabled individuals? For example, science, math, technology are three very important areas. But when you look at schools where disabled kids are going, they're frequently not learning those skills. We had in the US a series of ads that ran on for a couple years about bringing girls, young women, into science, math, technology fields. And they were great ads. And they included every group of people. You could see yourself, racial diversity, religious diversity, on and on. You never saw a person with a disability. Now, many people, like Alice, the poet, the beautiful poet, has an invisible disability. So we do need to be looking at how, in our messaging, we are not just talking about people with visible disabilities, but we need to look at how we are advancing the issues of the skills that people need. We need to seriously be looking in the area of disability. Not only are people getting those skill sets, but if they're not, why not? And in many cases, teachers aren't trained, administrators aren't trained, there's low expectations, there may be accommodations that need to be made in order to help people with different types of disabilities gain the skills that they need. But those are issues that we all need to be concerned about. So I don't think you or I or Tom or Joseph or anybody are here saying this is easy, but I do think that it is easier if we don't look at disability as something separate, if we're putting a disability lens on all the work that we're doing, then we're not having to do things double time.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at, do we have Asian disabled people
Yeah.
who are studying in STEM? If we don't, why not? What do we need to do? Is it relationship to low expectations of family, low expectations of teachers, on and on?
I just want to pick up on something you said there when you said, you know, people might say it's not easy. It's something I've heard quite a lot throughout the conference. And I just want to, I guess, remind people that it's also not easy to live in a world that isn't designed for you. It's also not easy to be discriminated against or be oppressed and marginalised. So if you are in a decision-making position, and all of you are leaders in this room, it is your responsibility. And yes, it might be hard, but there are plenty of people and organisations like the Harkin Summit, Harkin Institute, that are ready and willing to help. So when you haven't done something, of course it's going to be hard, but once you do, only good things are going to happen, right?
I think, you know, we look at this as challenging.
Yeah.
And I think most people in this room are up for challenges.
Yes.
In your day-to-day lives, you have challenges. Some of them are bigger than others. But at the end of the day, you look at a way of overcoming or working through, advancing the challenges. I hope that one thing that can come out of this, looking at all the different rules that you have here about how to share names, but it would be really, I think, advantageous for there to be some kind of a community board or something, in which case those of you who want to participate, and this is where Sean and Steve and others can come in later, what needs to be done so you can learn from each other, you can ask questions of each other. Most of you are here in this region. It's great that there are 30-some countries, and they should also be able to get information and share, but a way of sharing information. Because, you know, you can have a question, if you can put it up on a community board or something, there'll be other people who've had the same question, and maybe somebody else who's already done some work in this area. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work, but looking at what worked and what didn't work is equally important.
Yeah.
And I do believe that all of you who stayed, you're here because you're gaining valuable information. You've committed your time. And now you have to continue to really do more work that you'll be proud of, that your community will know is occurring.
I love that. Like, share best practice. You don't need to keep reinventing the wheel.
Right.
Yeah, right? It's, simple. Really, really good advice. The next question that I have, by the way, we've gone totally off script, but I'm loving the conversation. The next question that I have is about authenticity and disability, because in the first line of your book, you write that, I never wished I didn't have a disability. Now, we've spent a lot of time together over these last 2 days, and you know a little bit about me and my journey, but I now also feel the same, but there was a point in my life where I really rejected my disability identity. And it wasn't until I really learnt about the rights model or the social model of disability where it really changed things for me. It really, I guess, just lifted this big weight off my shoulders that I didn't even realise I was carrying. And even though I'm now a very proud disabled person, it's not always easy for us disabled people to be our authentic selves. Sometimes because of the bias that people have, sometimes because the perception is, especially in the workplace, disabled people aren't as capable or perhaps as productive, which we know are just myths. So what advice do you have for businesses to help create these safe spaces? But also, what advice do you have for fellow disabled people in order for them to take up space and be their authentic selves?
I mean, I think for those, it's a great question. For me, it's been important to have other friends with disabilities. And I didn't really have any friends with disabilities till I was about 9 years old. But when I first started meeting disabled people, it was great. And I think, if you talk to younger disabled people who will maybe have the opportunity to meet other disabled people, one of the issues that I think we're struggling with is our laws, and I support them wholly, that disabled children should be integrated and going to school with children who don't have disabilities. What that also means is that children are not seeing themselves in children's books. They're not learning about disability history in social studies books, history books, etc. And they're pretty isolated. And so through the ages of, through teenagers, there can be a lot of bullying going on and all this stuff that goes on with adults, dating, having children, being married, all these things. So I think we have to really do our very best to make sure that disabled younger people, and as I've been saying, older people too, middle-aged people, really need to be exposed. And I know you and I and many people in this room do a lot of mentoring. It's not like formal mentoring, but we kind of will talk to almost anybody that wants to talk to us. And because so frequently it's important, right? It's just that they want to talk with you and learn about who you are and what you're doing.
And I would rather somebody come and ask me than some random disabled person in the street, because I'm sure you've had this too, but I've had strangers come up to me, ask me what my life expectancy is, whether I can have sex, whether I can have children. And I'm like, who are you? They don't even start with a hello. Like, so much of this stuff is so personal. You wouldn't ask a non-disabled person this on the street. And I'm not saying please come up and ask me these questions, but...
In 5 minutes.
But yeah, as you said, we will happily take out some time to educate people.
So I think So in the 1970s, when I was living in Berkeley, I grew up in Brooklyn, I was involved in a program that was on sexuality and not only disability, but everything else. And so I was doing lectures. And when you would go at universities or community colleges. And I always knew that if somebody didn't ask me a question about whether or not I was sexually active, they were not getting in. Once somebody would ask, can you have intercourse? Talk with you about all that, that was fine. Then we can move forward. But I had friends who said to me, how can you talk so personally? And it was really difficult in the beginning. Sometimes I look back and say, well, that was the 70s. But nonetheless, I think, I was a teacher for 3 years. And one day I was reading a book, and I was reading about a woman named Harriet Tubman, who's a black civil rights leader in the 1800s. And she had a disability. And one of the little boys, they were 7, raised his hand. And I'm like, oh, I did 1 question now, and should I take the question? But he was like wiggling and jiggling so much. So I called on him and he said, how do you go to the bathroom? In the middle of this lesson, I'm like, I can't not answer this question. Because if I don't answer this question, all 30-some kids are now, how does she go to the bathroom? So I gave a pretty explicit but not overly inappropriate answer to the question. Then the lesson went on.
Yeah.
Kids would ask questions like, do you sleep in your wheelchair?
Yeah.
And one day for our holiday party, a kid came to class and said, my mother said to wish my sick teacher a Merry Christmas. And I'm Jewish. So I said to her, thank your mother very much. Please tell her I'm not sick, and I hope she has a happy Hanukkah. So, I will answer people's questions.
Yeah.
But I think you're completely right. A lot of people feel that's invasive. So, and I think the way people approach people and like they're helping people and all these things. On the other hand, what I still find is, so I'll be rolling in my neighborhood, and there's some stores where I can't open the doors.
Yeah.
And I'll go to ask someone to please open the door. And in so many cases, people ignore that I'm speaking. And I know that they think I'm coming up to ask for money.
Really?
I'm totally sure of it. And sometimes I just give up.
Yeah.
And other times I'll kind of like move forward and say, could you please open the door?
Yeah.
And if they get, would you please open the door? It's like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
But you can tell they're kind of coming out of a trance. Like, how can I pretend I didn't hear her? And I'm going to keep walking by.
Yeah.
So, disability is so not normalized.
No.
And I think that's really what everybody's job here is about. And
Yeah.
in essence, what the Harkin Institute and what the senator has done for all his years as a brother and then as an elected representative is not only lead by example, but one thing that I think is so very important are strong pieces of legislation with strong enforcement. And I think we do have a lot of that in the U.S. We have a lot of failings, but I think our legislation is something that should be looked at more.
And I think it's brilliant. So I think I shared this with you, but I went to Vegas went for a festival, and there was loads of ADA information on the website. Now, here in the UK, in London, where I live, I'd have to really search for that information or then have to go and contact somebody and say, what accommodations are you going to make? So there is a big, clear difference. And this is why legislation and policy is so important. Because we as disabled people, we spend so much time on disability admin. I always think about, if I really totaled up the hours of all the additional things that, I had to do, I'd probably have a whole another lifetime worth of living left to do. But I've got another question for you, and I think we're going to open it up to Q&A. What challenge are you giving everybody today? What action is it that you want everyone in this room to take?
I think by Monday, you need to have a list that you've put together about what you are going to be doing over the next month, and then move it forward. And you all come from different levels, but I do think you need to look at, if you're not at the upper level within your university, government agency, nonprofit, business, you need to look at what has our company been doing? Was I sent by the entity? Are they asking for reporting back in? But there needs to be some very clear outcomes. The organization that you're in, critical people need to know, and it needs to be something over the next couple of months where continuing to do what you've been doing may not be enough, in which case you really need to bump it up.
Yeah.
Continuing to do what you're doing may be enough, because maybe you really have a clear agenda of what has to happen.
Yeah.
You have timelines that you're measuring, and you continue to move forward. But the reality is, if the Institute writes to you in a month, in 6 months, in a year, and says, what have you learned? What are you doing? How could we run our meeting, our conferences, in a way that would give you more information? Writing to them and saying, this is what we would like more of now.
Yeah.
I think the Harkin Summits are a living, breathing entity. And Tom has spoken, and Joseph and Daniel, about the numbers of people, how it's been growing over the last couple of years, and the work that has gone on here, and and the number of companies that have been involved, investing. And you can see in the city, the Harkin Summit, all over the place. That's a good, true commitment.
Yeah.
But when they go to select the next venue, I think it's going to be important for them to say, this is what happened at our summit in 2022. This is what we did, and this is the buy-in we got,
Yeah.
and these are the changes that are happening. Because I think being seen as a train which is picking up speed,
Yeah.
an accessible train, which is picking up speed and is going to continue to go down the pathway,
Yeah.
is really what we're looking at. And it's a train that we want everyone on.
Absolutely. And I've learned so much myself. I've never ever seen a height adjustable podium. I have spoken on many stages with the likes of Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, at the UN, at World Expos. I've never ever been able to use a podium, and I'm going to play on it later. So thank you for everyone who made that happen, because there's a big amount of vulnerability when all the other speakers get to use something that you don't. And that's what accessibility is. It helps you to feel that you're equal. I wish that we could continue talking, but we have come to time. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but please all join me in thanking Judy for all of her work, her advocacy and activism, and for her time today.
No Q&A. Stand up.